Today we're going to, in basic, really brief, explain interpretations of arterial blood gases. Now, this is what an arterial blood gas looks like, and if you're unlucky enough, a consultant in your hospital will throw this in your face and ask you to interpret. That happened to me. I didn't know how to interpret. It was my first day too, so yeah. So don't be like me, and hopefully by the end of this video you will be able to simply interpret uh, blood gases. Now, in a blood gas, to simplify it, I'm not saying ignore all the other values, but to simplify it, you look at three important values. The pH, the carbon dioxide, and the HCO3. Now the pH has a normal range of 7.35 till 7.45 that has to be maintained by the body, the blood pH. The other two are like a balance. You know how our body is always in a hemodynamic state of trying to keep hemostasis. This is what keeps the hemostasis of the pH in the blood within reference range, the PaCO2 and the HCO3. The increase and decrease to keep everything within normal limits. Now, when it comes to the PaCO2, the normal range is 33 to 45 millimeter mercury. Below 33, that means the blood is more basic. It turns the blood more alkalotic. Above 45, it turns the blood acidic because PaCO2 or carbon dioxide is an acidic component. So the more that there is to it, the more acidic the blood is. Now, when it comes to bicarbonate, it's the opposite of carbon dioxide. The bicarbonate, HCO3, the more it is an alkalotic component. So the more that there is to it, the more basic the blood is, the more alkalotic the blood is. And the less that there is to it, meaning below 22, the more acidic the blood becomes. So the reference range for bicarbonate is between 22 to 28. So above this, more alkalotic, below this, more acidic, unlike the PaCO2. Now, when it comes to the pH, that's the first thing you look at. The first thing you determine in an arterial blood gas is whether the blood is acidic or basic. Now, obviously, it is general knowledge that when it comes to acid and bases, the less it is on the pH scale, the more acidic something is. The more it is on a pH scale, the more basic something is. The same concept applies in blood pH, as I mentioned. If it's below 7.35, it's more the blood is more in a state of acidosis. If it's above 7.45, the blood is in a more state of an alkalotic state, and within the reference range, it's neutral. Now, what do you look at after you determine whether the blood is acidic or basic? Once you determine whether the blood is acid in an acidosis or an alkalosis, you look at the carbon dioxide. Now, we say that, let's here give an example that the pH is below 7.35. That means the blood is acidotic, or the blood is in a state of acidemia. Now we look at the PaCO2. We say that PaCO2 is more of an acidic component. So the more that there is to it, the more acidic the blood is. The less that there is to it, the more basic the blood is. So if the blood is acidic, we ask ourselves, is the PaCO2 high? Is it the cause of the acidity of the blood? If the PaCO2 is high, in this case more than 45, yes, it is. Then the PaCO2 is causing the acidosis of the blood. Now, PaCO2 is related to the lungs and related to respiration. So this acidosis in the blood is caused by respiratory acidosis. For whatever reason, your lung is not functioning well, you're not breathing fast enough, you're taking shallow breaths, and these all help retain CO2 in the blood, increasing the number, causing the blood to be acidotic. Now, if your PaCO2 is below 33, then what? then that means the acidity of the blood is not caused by the CO2, and it has another reason. The other reason for the acidity or alkalosis of the blood is bicarbonate, which is a metabolic component, which in this case becomes the acidosis of the blood becomes a metabolic acidosis, because it's not the PaCO2 that's causing it. So if the PaCO2 was high, then it's related to respiratory, so respiratory acidosis. If it's not the PaCO2 causing the blood, it's the other. What is the other? It's metabolic acidosis. Now, the same applies when it comes to alkalosis. If the pH is high, the blood is in an alkalosis state. If we look at the PaCO2, is the PaCO2 high? PaCO2 is a marker of acidity, so if it's high, then the blood should be acidotic. If it's not acidotic, that means this is not the cause of the acidity in the blood. We look elsewhere. What is elsewhere? Again, metabolic alkalosis. Now, if the PaCO2 is low, then if an acid component in your blood is low, it will cause it to be basic or alkalotic. So in this case, the low amount of carbon dioxide in your blood turns your blood into alkalotic. So that means this is related to a respiratory alkalosis. Could be because of hyperventilating, stress, which panic attacks. Usually these conditions are seen in because you're taking out excess carbon dioxide from your lungs or your blood. Now, HCO3 is more of a let's say confirmation for what we said above. We look at this value to confirm that yes, indeed, it is metabolic or it is a respiratory cause, because we said these three values are important. Now, another thing about HCO3, as we mentioned earlier, is that it's a basic component of the blood. So if it increases, it causes alkalosis. If it decreases, it causes acidosis. So let's say in this case the pH is acidotic or less than 7.35. We look at the PaCO2. Is the PaCO2 high or low? If it's high, that means the acidosis of the blood is caused by the PaCO2, high PaCO2, which is respiratory. If it's low, if the PaCO2 is low, that means it's not because of the PaCO2 that the blood is acidic. So we look at the other component, which is metabolic acidosis. Now, in this case, you can see that the high PaCO2 causes respiratory acidosis. And also, we see that the HCO3 is high. So we said when the HCO3 is high, it means that the blood is more basic, because this is a basic component. So why in this case is it high? In this case, as we mentioned earlier, that to maintain a normal or a neutral pH, these two are constantly going up and down, trying to compensate for each other. So if this is increased and it causes acidity in the blood and it causes respiratory acidosis in the blood, then this increases to compensate for the acidity. The base increases to compensate for the acidity, just like in basic chemistry, to compensate and increase the value of this, or increase the pH in order to bring it back to the neutral reference range. The same applies here. Because there is a plummet in the HCO3, which causes, because it's a basic component, so a little of it will cause acidity of the blood. So because of the metabolic acidosis caused by the decrease in the number of HCO3, the number of PaCO2, which is an acidic component, also will try to decrease in order to make the pH more alkalotic. So your body will try to hyperventilate in these cases, just like in diabetic ketoacidosis, where your blood turns acidic because of an increased acidity in the blood. So your body, so you start breathing rapidly to to release CO2 in order to compensate for the acidity of the blood by making it more basic, by removing the acid component of the blood. So the same applies for alkalosis. We look at the pH. Is it higher than 7.45? Yes, so it's an alkalotic pH. It's an alkalosis state. Then we look at the PaCO2. The PaCO2 is higher than 45. So that cannot be the reason why the blood is alkalosis, in alkalosis, because a high PaCO2 causes an acidic blood. So we look at the other component, which is the metabolic alkalosis, which is the metabolic component. So it is metabolic alkalosis. Why is it metabolic alkalosis? Because we said HCO3 is a basic component. So an increase in HCO3 causes alkalosis. So therefore, this is an alkalotic, metabolic alkalosis. To compensate for the alkalosis of the blood, the body retains carbon dioxide in the blood in order, and increases the levels in order to make the blood more acidic, or to decrease the value in order to put it within the reference range. Now when it comes to a decrease in the CO2, in this case below 33, that means what? Since CO2 is an acidic component, that means a decrease in the number of acidic component causes alkalosis. So indeed, this is the cause of the alkalosis of the pH. So what does HCO3 do to compensate for this? It decreases the level, hoping to turn the pH more acidic, because this is a basic. So if it decreases the level, it causes more acidity in the blood. Now, to stimulate and to keep all this, to stick all this info, there's a simple question. I didn't bring a ABG because you only really need 3 values of an ABG, and most ABGs are like blurry online. So in this case, the patient comes with a pH of 7.2. Now, what is the first thing we said? Is that to look at the pH. Once you look at the pH, you determine whether the blood is acidic or basic. Is the blood acidic or basic in this case? It is acidic. Why? Because it's below 7.35. So because it's below 7.35, the pH is, the blood is in a state of acidosis. Now, what is next? What do we look at next? The next thing we look at is the PaCO2. When we look at the PaCO2 in this case, it is below 33. If it's below 33, is it really the cause of acidosis in the blood? No, it's not, because it should be above 45 to be the cause of acidosis in the blood. So in this case, it being below 33 means that we should look at another component that is causing acidosis in the blood, which in this case is the HCO3, which is at level of 12. So a decrease in the basic component, which is the bicarbonate component of the blood, causes acidemia, which in this case causes a low pH. An increase in the number of HCO3 causes alkalemia. So this is, in this case, the cause of the low pH. This is what is causing the pH to be 7.2. So we established that it's not respiratory related, but rather it's metabolic related. So it is a metabolic acidosis. Now, what did we say about compensation and not compensation? So we eliminate answers that have, first we establish that it's a metabolic acidosis. So it's not a respiratory acidosis. This answer is wrong also. Now, here it's metabolic alkalosis, so it's wrong, so it's metabolic acidosis. Now, when it comes to partial compensation or full compensation is usually, well, obviously, when it comes to actual acid base, there are calculations to check whether something is fully or partially compensated. But from the look of an eye, you can tell whether it's you can guess whether it's partially or fully compensated, or there is no compensation at all. In cases of full compensation, the pH should be normal. If the values are abnormal, the pH should be normal. So this is not full compensation. Partial compensation is when the pH is still abnormal, but the values, there is an increase in one of there is an increase or a decrease in both values. That means they're trying to compensate. If it was without compensation, then one of the values would be normal. That means that if in this case, since it's an metabolic acidosis, then the PaCO2 should have been normal for it to be without compensation. That means the PaCO2 is not trying to compensate for the acidity in the blood. Here, the PaCO2 is low. Since the PaCO2 is low, that means it's trying to compensate by removing the acidic component of the blood. The body is trying to compensate, or the low PaCO2 is trying to compensate by removing itself from the equation to make the blood more alkalotic. That means to make it more basic, or bring it back to its reference range. So in this case, the the metabolic acidosis has a partial compensation, which is the PaCO2, which is decreasing itself to compensate for the acidity of the blood. Anyways, that's basically a very brief, kind of long, but very brief, very simple, very quick way of interpreting an ABG. I hope this was beneficial, and I hope you can actually interpret this with your doctors. Thank you.